So without further ado, this is the regular Board of Education meeting. Today is Monday, the 20th of 2021. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the School Districts of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by I had one good working year when I came in here. Thank you, Karen. I can go ahead, Nick? I'm going to start all over. Just kidding. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the School Districts of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough and the Chatham Township, Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind taking attendance?
Mr. Onick, Ms. Ciccarelli, here. Ms. Clark, here. Mr. Del Sandro, here. Ms. Kenny, here. Mr. Ryan, Mr. Smith, here. And Ms. Weber.
Here.
6 present and accounted for.
Thank you. If you're able, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag goes over by Peter. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Very good. So we're just going to move right on to the presentations. I will not have a president's comment right now, but I will make one just before the public comments. So Dr. D'Souza, I'm going to send it right over to you to talk about the opening of the schools.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Yes, so since our last meeting, of course, schools have opened. We're in our 4th week now, I think. So after this week, we'll soon be approaching a month of having schools in session. It's been a pretty good opening overall. Students have been terrific, as I've written to parents and others in the various updates that I've sent. Our teachers have done a good job of welcoming students back into school on a more normal basis and on a regular school day. So we really have had a nice start. We do have a couple of challenges that we're continuing to work through. I mentioned at the last meeting that staffing remains an issue for us, particularly in the paraprofessional realm. We are suffering from the nationwide bus shortage, and even though we subcontract out our routes and our transportation services, those providers also are suffering from the shortage of drivers. And like many other districts, we have faced instances where we haven't been able to staff the routes. We're trying to work through that, and we're trying to work with First Student to stabilize their, their workforce and make sure that our students get picked up and dropped off on time. But that's definitely a significant issue. We've also had staffing issues with food service. Chartwell's is our provider, and they have done the best they can of trying to replace staff that didn't show up for work and expand their staff so that they can service all of our schools, but that remains something that we're working through. A couple of new initiatives or requirements that are coming through with the state. We have standardized testing that is set to launch over the next few weeks. I've talked about that before, but our schools are working on those logistics and are going to be communicating them to families soon. New Jersey is also supplying school districts with testing resources for staff who are unvaccinated and also for students whose parents can opt them into testing. We are awaiting more information about that. In the meantime, we will begin testing our staff who are unvaccinated at the end of, or at the beginning of next week. We're approaching a 90%, I think, overall vaccination rate among our staff, but for those who are not yet vaccinated in accordance with Governor Murphy's most recent executive order, they will undergo weekly testing beginning next week. So those are all the moving parts right now. I think overall it's been a pretty good start. Certainly have had reports from teachers and counselors and principals of very happy kids and kids who are coming to school and doing everything that we're asking them to do. And I know we've been trying to communicate that out to families, and we've had a couple of back-to-school nights under our belts already in which we've done that. So on that note and along those lines, I have invited our two supervisors of student health and well-being in this evening for a presentation. Occasionally we have supervisors come in to talk about their particular subject area. Tonight we're not going to do so much of that as much as we will have Lisa and Karen talk about some of the survey results from last spring of our students when we tried to get a pulse on their mental health and how they were feeling about such an unusual school year. They'll provide us an overview of that, touch on some places where we see differences between what students were reporting last year versus what they were reporting in years prior when we administered surveys like these. And they will also talk about some of the programs and initiatives that we have launched to try to address student health and mental well-being and their transition back into a normal school environment as we're still working our way through the pandemic. So I'm going to ask the board members to retreat into the audience. We'll have Lisa and Karen give us their presentation, and then you can come back up on stage when they're done and ask any questions that you might have.
Okay, we'll get started here. Good evening, everybody. Lisa and I are grateful for the opportunity to be here with you tonight to provide you with some information and some insights into the well-being of our middle school and high school students. And as Mike mentioned, we're going to do this by reviewing some data that's been collected through a series of wellness surveys. And we'll talk about the mental health supports that exist here in Chatham for all students. And then we'll end with a review of some of the special programs that have been instituted in the past year and that are coming up in the year to come in order to address mental health. Let's start by talking about our wellness surveys. We administered wellness surveys in December of 2016 and in December of 2019. Both of those were in partnership with the Madison Chatham Coalition. In 2021, we had approximately 1,550 respondents in grades 6 to 12. In this survey, we posed some questions to address the impact of the pandemic school year. By the way, we also administered the 2021 survey to our Lafayette students, but we've not included that data in tonight's presentation because past surveys have not been administered in grades 4 to 5. We're just going to be comparing sort of apples to apples tonight. Try and get that over there. There we go. So here are the key takeaways from the 2021 survey data. What stayed the same were patterns regarding stress and suicidal ideation. Overall positive trends included the students reporting less substance abuse and the students reporting feeling safer at school. We do have some concerns, though, after this survey data was looked at. Our students are sleeping less, and they're reporting greater signs of depression. Students are also spending more time socializing online. All right, let's start with sleep. Whoops. We know that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that adolescents get 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night. The National Sleep Foundation breaks that down by age with recommendations that 6 to 13-year-olds get 9 to 11 hours of sleep each night, and that 14 to 17-year-olds get 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Our survey results are clear that our students are not getting enough sleep. Next slide. This slide illustrates that. So most of our kids are getting less than 8 hours of sleep. In 2021, which is represented here in yellow, we see there's been an increase in the number of middle and high school students who are getting 7 hours of sleep or less when compared to previous years. This is significant, and we wonder if this may be tied in some ways to the increase in online socializing that we'll talk about later. When we break our 2021 data by gender, we see that females, who are represented here in red, are getting less sleep than males. The greater hours of sleep to the left of this slide are represented primarily by males, and as we move to the right of the slide, we see that more females than males are getting the least amount of sleep. Sorry, our clickers, oh, there we go. So in 2021, we asked our middle and high school students to reflect on their perception of the sleep that they've been getting as compared to previous years, and the majority of our students indicated that they are getting less sleep than in previous years. This is highlighted here in yellow.
Okay, now we're going to shift to looking at substance use. And we have been collecting data on substance use over the last few years. And you'll see that the substance use among our student population has dropped. We believe some of that impact, or some of those results may be some of the impact around legalization of marijuana, which is interesting, the dynamic that that plays in terms of marijuana use, and also effective prevention programming on vaping. So the first slide is gone. Okay, first slide, alcohol use. So this is looking at, we've asked students, yeah, you can go to the next slide. We asked students what their past 30-day use is around alcohol, and you can see in 2021 that the rate has dropped with alcohol use, which is interesting because when you look at national statistics on alcohol use among adults, it has actually gone up in the last year. Okay, the next slide. Looking at vaping. So vaping has dropped off considerably. You know, a few years ago, this was the topic of conversation was about the vaping use among teens, and now it has dropped pretty considerably, at least among our population that we polled. You know, I would say that this is probably, in a large part, is the prevention effort that has taken place not only locally, but nationally. There's been a lot of information given to students, whether it's in social media or that they've gotten actual prevention programs, that they've learned a lot about the risks of vaping. Here in the Chathams, we actually had our health teachers and our student assistance counselors receive professional development on a New Jersey program called Don't Get Vaped In. And that program was utilized in our health classes in the middle school and the high school. So if you talk to young people, they will tell you that vaping is dangerous. They seem to understand that it is dangerous, and there are some serious health consequences from vaping. So I think a lot of teens have gotten scared as a result of what they have learned. So looking at marijuana use is also down, which is interesting, because when you look at the legalization that is taking place across the nation, the assumption would be that it would go up, but for some reason it is down among our population. The next slide shows, though, the perception of use. And perception of marijuana use for frequent users, students are reporting that there is less of a greater risk around marijuana use. So definitely their perception in terms of the risk around using marijuana is dropping. But this has been a trend for some time. We've been seeing this trend that the attitudes are shifting around marijuana. And I think most of that is a result of the legalization that is taking place across the United States.
So now let's consider student views of safety at school. We collected data in this category from the last 2 surveys, that's 2019 and 2021. And we'll consider here the impact of the presence of the Class 3 officers in our building, COVID, and school violence. We're looking for the sweet spot for this clicker. There we go. Overall, our students feel safe at school. Here you will see that the students report feeling safer at school in 2021, again represented in yellow, versus 2019 represented in red. And when we ask them how safe do you feel when a police officer is present, we see that students are feeling increasingly safe when a police officer is present at their school. Oh, well. Okay, then we asked them, how often do you think about a school shooting? And most reply that they think about a school shooting a little or not at all. And you see 2021 data indicates that most are not thinking about a school shooting at all. Lisa and I have talked about this, and we've wondered if, the threat in 2021 in terms of safety was COVID, not so much school shooting. Maybe that's what was on their mind.
Hold on. Okay, so now we're going to shift and looking at overall wellness and mostly looking at mental health and stress, because these seem to be the areas of concern that we are seeing, that we've continued to see a trend in. We're also going to look at some of the impact that COVID maybe has on wellness and also teen technology use. So mental health has been a focus of concern over the last several years, both here in Chatham and nationally. Data shows there is reason to be concerned about mental health for Chatham teens. Stress levels are high, expectations are high, and as a result, many teens just don't know how to cope. Overall, though, our middle school and high school students report that their overall health is good, very good, or excellent, and that teens are definitely more reliant on technology. And the speculation is that certainly technology use and an increase in technology use may be also impacting their mental health. So looking at the data. All right, so looking at stress and what was reported back in 2019 is mostly the same. There is some of a shift in terms of moderate to great stress, but we have seen this trend that students are reporting stress in their lives. So it's not unusual to see this. I think that we've been seeing this trend for some time. Females are also experiencing more stress than males, and they are experiencing more moderate and great stress than males. And that was similar to in 2019. The most stressed out grade level is 11th grade, and this is not completely surprising, because junior year is known as the most difficult year due to college testing, college and career preparation, and a greater workload with more offerings of AP level classes. Students' perception of stress, hold on, get there. So looking at their perception of where their stress is coming from and academic pressure. And when you look at this, students will say that most of that pressure is coming from themselves, so they're putting the pressure on themselves, and they report that their parents are that second source of pressure when it comes to academic pressure. The most concerning result in regards to mental health is about depression. And so there is a dramatic increase in students answering yes to the following question: have you spent more than 2 weeks feeling sad and hopeless that you stopped doing normal activities? That is a question that is used by mental health clinicians to diagnose depression. And you will see here, in 2016, 13.5% of our students said yes to that question, 2019, 16.4%, and now in 2021, 23.8%. Okay, so there's a dramatic increase in students answering yes to that statement, but this is consistent with what we're also seeing nationally, because there are more students reporting that they're having mental health symptoms. Okay. All right, so consideration of suicide in the past 12 months. So that's the next survey question, and we've been asking this question for several years. The data hasn't really changed much, so you're seeing that just under 8% of students are answering yes to this question. But that in 2021 is 114 students saying that they considered suicide in the past 12 months. So it's still concerning. It's something that we are paying attention to. And obviously we want to address these students that may be struggling. Just an interesting, I was collecting data on this and looking at risk assessments that we do in district. And a risk assessment is conducted in district when there is concern that a student is self-harming or possibly suicidal. So the statistics that I found is in 2018-2019 school year, the district had 69 assessments performed. Then in 2019-2020 year, so that was partly COVID year, so starting in March, there were 46 assessments done in district. And then last year, where we had a hybrid year or a partial school day, there were 33 assessments that are done. Now, to date, as of the beginning of this school year, there have been 11 risk assessments. Okay, so time spent socializing. You can see that we have more students spending 5 or more hours. That has increased over the last year. So we have more students socializing online. And that's probably really a result of COVID because they are not able to interact with each other maybe in person, or they have to limit how they're interacting with each other. So they are socializing online, so they're spending more time on their phones, online interacting with one another. But there is concern with students spending that much time on social media, which is not always really positive, the influences that they're seeing, that this could be also having an impact on mental health symptoms.
So what are the mental health supports that we have here in Chatham? How do we help our students? This slide presents a visual of our 3 tiers of support for our students, and all of these tiers of support fall within the purview of school nurses, school counselors, and the child study team. Nope, go back one. There we go. So in Tier 1, we offer support to all students. These are services that are delivered throughout a typical school day. We utilize lessons, assemblies, instructional experiences to build the capacity of our students. And our goal is to support the development of well-balanced students who can advocate for themselves. Within Tier 1, you see that teachers address social emotional competencies within the curriculum in the classrooms. We equip teachers in supporting student mental health by offering professional development in that area. And the teachers deliver focused units about mental health in health and in school counseling. School counselors, as you know, are also available to all of our students throughout our district. And at times, school counselors go into the classrooms and they deliver instruction. They offer individual and small group opportunities for students, and they're frequently in consultation with teachers and administrators and other staff members on behalf of our students. They lead and coordinate these whole school, whole community initiatives and presentations that we know so well in our schools. For instance, our Week of Respect that's coming up, you'll notice that the school counselors are at the helm and planning a lot of those activities. School nurses see it all. They're often the first staff members that our kids turn to when they have a mental health need, and often those mental health needs are masquerading as physical complaints. But our school nurses are great at sorting that out, and they're in contact with teachers and counselors and administrators all the time on behalf of our students.
So Tier 2 supports are for some of our students, and these are the students that need more individualized or more direct interventions, and these students are maybe identified by staff members, maybe even parents, that they could benefit from more added support and extra support. So for example, an elementary age student may be recommended to a social skills group that's run by a school counselor. A student could also be referred to INRS, Committee to assess and address their academic and emotional needs. Tier 3, which is really for few students, and these are our students who demonstrate the greatest need in district. And these students would be those that have an individualized education plan, a 504 plan, or a student that's participating in our district-wide telehealth program. So speaking of telehealth, hold on, we're not done yet. Okay, speaking of telehealth, so telehealth, this is a program that was launched in April of 2021, and this was really a result of COVID and the impact COVID was having on the emotional needs of our students. And there were a lot of students that were struggling, but they may have had limited access to some of the resources in school based on the condensed day. So they would be seeing counselors virtually. They would actually have the opportunity to meet with a counselor after school virtually. 13 of our district mental health professionals participated in this program. We've seen 60 students in the program so far, and we have done 242 hours of therapy since the program started, which has been really exceptional. So some other programs that we have worked on and have been launched within district, as I just mentioned, telehealth. We also have a program that we launched this summer called Summer Connect, in which Karen will talk about in a minute. Last year, Good Grief was contracted to come in and provide curriculum and training for our middle school health teachers, which is a resiliency program. We have a professional development program starting this year for teachers called Mindfulness on the Brain. We're also infusing Sandy Hook Promise at the high school this fall, and there's also an expansion of extracurricular offerings taking place in district.
So our Summer Connect program. This is one of the new initiatives that we had this summer, and it was offered to rising 6th and 9th graders at Chatham Middle School and Chatham High School. And our goals here were to engage students in team-building activities that would give them a chance to meet each other. We wanted to provide an orientation to their new school building and allow them time to find classrooms and offices. We wanted to give them an orientation to our electronic learning system. So at Chatham Middle School, of course, that's Google Classroom. Chatham High School, that's Schoology. Our middle school program was led by 6th grade science teacher Rachel Goldberg and our middle school health and phys ed teacher Samantha Kenny. They led our students through various team building activities, including icebreakers. They had a team escape room challenge. They provided an opportunity for a scavenger hunt through the building. The high school program that you see pictured here was led by our health and phys ed teacher Anna Amster and our school counselor Alexis Irene. This program featured some team building activities which culminated in an exciting experience on the high ropes, which you also see here. The students received their orientation to Schoology, and then they took their schedule for their first day of school and they walked to each classroom so they'd have a sense of where they were going on day one. The summer high school Summer Connect program actually was enhanced by the inclusion of 36 students from the LINKS program at Chatham High School. This is a peer mentor program, which is led this year by Miss Irene and Ms. Ryan. Both programs were originally slated to be held for one half day. We first sought counselor referrals in order to identify the most at-risk students, kids who were fully virtual last year, had not stepped into a classroom in over a year, and may have had some other concerns with, transitioning to their new school and transitioning back to school. And after that, we welcomed parent referrals, and we had a huge response, so much so that we had to expand the programs to three sessions each. And we're really grateful for the willingness of our program leaders to put that extra time in, and to the school administrators who approved the use of space at a really difficult time toward the end of the summer where floors were being waxed and everything else. We have some wellness initiatives in the classroom, and those are expanding. So as we returned to school last summer, as Lisa mentioned, we partnered with Good Grief to offer a curriculum in our CMS health classes that aim to promote resilience among students. So our teachers received professional development from Good Grief, and they provided lessons during the health class to all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Coming up this year, Lisa and I will be working with middle school students to explore mindfulness on the brain, which is a neuroscientific approach to mindfulness and its benefits. This is going to be an interdepartmental offering. It's going to include a mindfulness workshop, where teachers will learn how to infuse moments for mindfulness and gratitude right in their classrooms every day. We're going to lead a book study called The Whole Brain Child that was written by Daniel Siegel. And one of the reasons we look to start this at the middle school is that we have a core group of staff members which have very high interest in this topic, but also Lafayette has a model mindfulness program, Calm Cougars, running there and running successfully. It has been for several years. So the students are already well-versed in mindfulness practice in the classroom when they arrive at Chatham Middle School. It's a great feeder program for this. This fall at Chatham High School, we're going to launch the Sandy Hook Promise Start with Hello program that's going to be launched during the week of what we expect, which is the week of October 4th. And during that week, our 10th graders in their health class will receive 3 lessons, and they're going to be team taught by a health teacher and one of the counselors from the counseling department. And these are going to address things such as the difference between social isolation and healthy alone time. So moving forward, we look for ways to create and expand additional opportunities to explore and address the needs of our students through programming, through building community within each school, enhancing opportunities to support student mental health through curricular avenues, and also continuing to enhance our mental health services. Thank you.
Excellent. Can you shut the spotlight off? What's that? Okay. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Lisa and Karen. That was excellent. I want to see if the board has any questions first before I ask my questions. No, I'm going to jump in and then you guys jump in. So you noted that the alcohol use was down this past year. I guess I would say keep an eye on that because nobody could go out. So, parents were all in their homes. There was no opportunity. Parents were conscious about, not having students gather. So we might just need to keep an eye on that. What concerned me most, and I'm going to have to look at the slides again, was there was a group of students that said they do not feel safe at all in school. Do we have a handle on, that group of kids, or at least, how to address or help that?
Good question.
Yeah. That's a good question.
It is a good question.
And you know what, if you don't have answers now, that's fine.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just going to throw out there that is concerning, of course.
Sure.
If there's a reason they don't feel safe in school, how do we address that? How do we get every student to feel safe in school? Is it something in school? Is it something at home? How do we bridge that gap? So that was one item of concern. Of course, we knew the markers for the depression is a big concern. The telehealth has been really utilized, which I was going to say it's a great success, but the fact that it's being utilized is why it's successful, and the kids are reaching out. The Summer Connect program, again, you don't have to answer this now. So that was counselor referrals and then parent referrals. Now, it was for kids that were maybe struggling, having some anxiety about going back to school. I question the wisdom about throwing 30 feet in the air that has anxiety about going to school, but it seemed to work out pretty well. Is there capacity to maybe expand that to even a larger group? Again, I don't need an answer now, but if we see that was so successful and, there were 60 kids, well, maybe 100 kids could benefit from that. And as parents maybe realize that program is available, maybe you'll get more. And if we need to put resources to it, let's consider that as well. Because it really was a great success from what Mike told me. The kids were just, enjoying school, and the apprehension had somewhat melted away. and they felt more comfortable in their environment, although I don't know how throwing a kid 30 feet in the air is going to do that, but it seemed to work. Okay, so my big question here is, you mentioned a lot of new programs. How do we judge, again, don't need an answer tonight, but how do we judge the effectiveness of those programs, and how do we jettison those that aren't working, that we're not reaching the students the way we thought we would, versus, you know, programs that really, really hit the mark and are doing great, and we either expand on those or continue to increase those and provide more resources. I just want to make sure that we're, you know, funding those things that work really well and just getting rid of things that, you know, we thought were a good idea, but you know what, in practice it didn't really hit the mark.
Yeah, well, I can let you know that with Summer Connect, we did survey the kids and the parents after that program was over and before the first day of school, because we wanted to know, you know, there was kind of a sweet spot there where we wanted to know what, you know, based on how you felt before the program about coming to school and how you feel now, and also the parents' perceptions of how the kids felt and how they felt after the program. We had a hugely positive response to that. We had talked with Karen, Chase, and Mike about when we first came up with this idea. You know, we weren't really sure how long of a program to make it. Do we do this over a course of a few days with the same kids? Do we make it a full day, a half day? We also played with when do we have it in the summer, and we decided that we would get these kids when the butterflies and the anxiety were probably at their height, like right before school is going to start. And we think that that was good timing. It turned out to be very complicated, though, at the high school, because the athletics and the athletic tryouts and everything had started, so we lost a few kids because of that. So yeah, we're going to look at all these things as we move through. We're going to collect data with our Mindfulness on the Brain program. We're going to have some of the teachers help us collect data before and after in terms of the effect that, you know, this program has on kids and has on the classroom. So we're going to do the best we can with that to really get some solid data behind us as we move forward with these.
Yeah, perfect. Excellent. Yeah, I just think a lot of the students, maybe they didn't know about it or their parents didn't know about it, but a lot of them, I think, you know, the vast majority of rising 6th graders and rising 9th graders, even if they said, no, I'm fine, I got it, you know, I had an older brother or sister, then I'm good. But I think there's still maybe some benefit, just like most colleges now offer that first-year seminar. It's not optional, the kids all have to take it. And some of it's just icebreakers, some of it's reading a book, some of it's, you know, an activity. So it's just something to throw out there that maybe if it's so successful, we can somehow incorporate it to capture a larger population of the students. But all great stuff, and I hope, you know, folks watch the meeting again and take advantage of some of the services that are available. You know, both the parents and the students take advantage, you know, and reach out. Does anybody else have any? Lotta? Oh, can't hear a word you're saying.
Can you hear me now? Okay. In terms of data collection, I noticed that it's a joint effort between Madison and Chatham. Do you overlay the data together to see if there was anything that was Chatham specific that did not, that jumped out that would be an outlier?
So our 2016 and 2019 data was done with the Chatham Madison Coalition, right? So that was an outside agency, Epiphany, that actually ran that entire survey. We only have the reports from those surveys. We don't actually have raw data. But when we did the 2021 survey, we actually did it ourselves. So we did it through a Google form. So we have all the raw data on that, and that's been really useful for us because then you can really look specifically at trends and things that you want to look at that could be potential, you know, correlations. Is that,
Well,
you would like to know if we could put all of it together? Is that?
Well, I guess our population was about, you know, 1,200 students or so that participated, or I forget the number, but
1,500,
1,500
right?
students. Maybe I misunderstood. I thought it was the survey was also given to Madison students.
No, so the Madison Chatham Coalition, that's an organization that is actually sort of funded through the YMCA, but they do prevention work in both towns, Madison and Chatham. So they did surveys. We did a survey just for our Chatham students,
Okay.
through the coalition. So they are sponsoring it, they helped fund part of it. And then they also polled Madison students, separate surveys. So we have just the
have
reports on our
Chatham-specific.
Chatham students, correct?
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
I have a quick, can you hear me? It's more of just a reminder, I say this often, about helping our students become self-advocates, and especially when we're looking at indicators for that the stress they're feeling is majority are reporting that it comes from themselves. And I know that a lot of these students, especially at our high school, are taking a lot of demanding classes, and there could be, I'm saying, we try to avoid midterms, we try to avoid these hot times where they're just feeling that pile on. But I think we need to remind our students to, if they feel they have a week, a period of time where they have papers due, too many exams, maybe they're in the field hockey championships that week, and the demands of a lot of different things, that they know that they can go to their teachers, explain their situation, and my hope and my understanding is those teachers will show some flexibility and work with the students. I think we're returning to a norm-ish, and we need to remind teachers and students that as we return, that they have the ability to advocate for themselves, their teachers will listen to them, and that they can show some flexibility in terms of not having too much at one time. And even at the university level, students are having the ability to do this too now. So, you know, it's trickling up. So if those conversations are not happening, we need to push out to our students how to do this. Because sometimes, I can only speak for my own kids who would be like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. But there is a command, you know, like a chain of command that your teachers will listen to. Nobody wants a kid to have 3 tests of paper and a field hockey championship in 1 week. So, and sometimes it just happens because of scheduling, and it can be untangled and help manage the stress. So I don't have it, it's more of a comment than anything else.
So I noticed that when you showed that the vaping percentage numbers were down dramatically, did you ever poll on nicotine use?
Yes, we did in this survey. We have for the last several years. It's so slight, the nicotine use. It's actually...
Okay. Which is great, but it surprises me because I know that like at the college level, because I ask my kids about this all the time, I'm like, you know, when all of this stuff came out about how bad vaping was for you, and my kids even said to me at the time, one was in high school, one was in college, like, nobody really vapes that much anymore. It's gone down dramatically. But I've noticed at the college level as a whole, just from like observing large gatherings at the college level, that it appears that the nicotine use is going up, even though the vaping use is going down. So I was just curious at this age group.
Yeah,
That's
I
good to
mean,
know.
the
Yeah.
survey is indicating very extremely low use with the cigarette use, but
Right.
I will tell you, certainly that was a little bit of a trend that was happening with kids that were vaping and vaping a lot, is that they started to not like the effects from the vaping because maybe they were having some of the consequences.
Right,
And they
right.
were turning to cigarettes.
Right.
But
But you're still seeing that as a very small percentage.
yeah, it's a very
Yeah,
small
okay, good,
percentage, yeah.
good. Thanks.
I just want to thank Lisa and Karen. I think it was November of 2019 when we abolished one position and created these 2 positions because we were seeing concerning trends among our students related to a lot of what we saw tonight and some other issues. And who would have known in November of 2019 or thereabouts that a few months later we'd be in a totally different state of the world. And for those who don't know, Karen's background is in nursing. She worked at Goriab at Morristown Memorial Hospital before she came into education. Her medical expertise during this time has been invaluable, and she's been really the go-to point person for all of the issues relating to quarantining and exposure and PPE and how to configure nurses' offices and isolate students who are symptomatic and so on and so forth. And Lisa's background, of course, is in counseling and acute counseling, and she was our student assistance counselor at the high school for many years. So her expertise has been invaluable when it comes to trying to create more stability in our programming for students and support them as they're maybe not ill physically, but trying to work their way through the pandemic. So I just want to thank the two of them. They've really been helpful to us and supportive of our students for the past 18 months.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. I think some of the numbers that you said didn't change. A lot of that's because of the program you pushed out in the younger grades. You're preparing them more for self-advocacy, for restfulness, for, taking a minute to themselves. So I think we would have seen higher numbers had you not pushed some of this wellness programs down to the lower grades and giving them the tools that they need to cope with some of the stress that comes their way. It'd be nice if we didn't need any of your staff, but I fear that we're going to need more rather than less. But thank you very much for the presentation. This was fantastic.
Welcome. Thank you.
Don't feel obligated to stay. I know you have a 14-hour day, so we don't want to add to it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Dr. Wisman, back to you. Do you have anything else under your?
I think that's it for me for now.
Peter, over to you for construction and all those white blocks outside the high school.
Well, the white blocks outside the high school are the insulation materials that are needed for the sections of the high school roof that still need to be completed. The high school roof, the contractors are currently working on the roof section at the administration wing. Next is the section of the roof above the art and home ec rooms. And then as the contractor refers to it, the sawtooth cut roof on the cafeteria, which kind of looks like a zipper. The contractor has been working weekends on the high school, and as the project goes on, we will evaluate whether the cafeteria roof, which is in the best shape of all of them, will be pushed to the spring or next summer. Because unfortunately, working just Saturdays and Sundays, they can only get so much accomplished every weekend, and it has to be weather permitting. Shifting over to Washington, the roof is about 99% complete. Should be totally finished by the end of this week. The masonry work on the middle school roof around the gym has been complete. The contractor was supposed to receive the insulation last week. We haven't heard if he's done that or received it yet. At this point, that roof can only be done at night or on weekends, so we may push that roof back until June, because I'm getting very skeptical that they can do the whole roof, before the weather turns, or just, depending on weekend weather. That's all I have, unless anybody has any other questions.
The Washington roof is 99% complete? And
Yes.
That's being done on weekends as well?
That's being done weekends after school. That was done last weekend. There's a few items they'll do after school this week to finish up.
Did they give you a project plan to say, the CMS is going to take, 10 days, so therefore we know it's going to take?
They gave us the number of man hours, which was 5 weekends, perfect weather. So how many weekends are you going to have? A Saturday's nice, a Sunday's not, or 2 weekends is a washout. So it's kind of, the roof is continuous, so it's very difficult to say, well, we can do the front half and then go back and do the other half. So I'm just hedging, and as you know, this morning when you woke up, it was about 55 degrees. So as we get more into October, it will get cooler at night, which I don't know if materials will properly adhere. That's not my expertise. I'm relying on the architect. And
are you concerned about losing contractors? Or?
No, because we've done this through the Ed Services Commission, where they've gone out to bid. So the current contractor has a contract. If they want to void it, the roofing company will find another contractor to take over. We can pay them, like at the middle school, we can pay them for the brickwork they've done, which is in a statement of values with the whole job, and then pay someone else to do the roofing later on. I don't think they will turn the jobs down, but I'm trying to protect and do what's best for the building and our assets, rather than just try to placate a contractor.
No, for sure. I just don't want to get jammed up if we push everything to the spring, and then every other district has pushed things to the spring,
Yeah.
and then somehow we get pushed to the back burner, and our roofs aren't being,
Right.
Every time we push a roof, it kind of throws us off our whole schedule.
I know it's been a tough one this year because all you hear is well, the insulation's not available because of this, this, and this. It's available, but we can't find a trucker because there are no truckers. And it's almost where you're like, hey, I think I've heard every story in the book, but I know it's affecting not just me, it's affecting everywhere in New Jersey and the United States. So it's been a challenge.
Understood, okay. All right, thanks, Peter. Any other updates, Peter?
No, that's it for me, thank you.
Okay, perfect. We're going to move over to the committee reports then. Michelle, you're going to stand in for Ann on personnel? Ann, right, Ann, you're out, right? You were not in the list for the meeting.
But I have an update, but you can.
Oh, sorry.
Have at it. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
September 8th, and we talked a lot about what's that? Personnel. I'm sorry, personnel. And we talked a lot about what Dr. LaSousa said at the opening, just about difficulties with staffing in terms of paraprofessionals, substitutes, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, kind of strategized with Ms. Grant about ways to maybe entice and engage the community in finding substitutes within the community, and same for paraprofessionals. In addition, we got an update on vaccination rates for staff and what the testing protocol would be for unvaccinated staff members and potentially for unvaccinated students if they chose to participate and their parents wanted them to opt into testing, which Dr. LaSousa is going to gather more information through the state, which is now going to offer those services in Chatham, though, right? In addition, we had a discussion about anticipated student services, mostly in the area of behaviorists, and possibly looking into ways to bring in more certified, board-certified behaviorists into our buildings. This is annoying. I'm sorry. Am I too close or too far? No. Bring it closer? Is anyone else hearing that or just me? I'm sorry, I'm hearing like ringing, right? And so it's something that we want to explore resources, look in ways to support our students, especially in this transition. Some of our youngest students are having difficulties with the transition back to school after not being here consistently or at all. So it's certainly something that the school district is prioritizing. It's something the board supports, and it's something hopefully we'll be able to bring kind of more support in place. And that was about it. And Dr. LaSousa touched on most of the hot button items in terms of personnel.
And, sorry, next time personnel meets, the BCBA, do you mind digging into that a little deeper with Dr. LaSousa and, maybe Beth or whoever? I think we need to, this is a coveted position. It's difficult to find, even if we have to, use contractors. If you don't mind, from a personnel point of view, if you can dig into that a little bit deeper and maybe report back to the board. Again, I think, what we're seeing is that kids are struggling. They're struggling coming back, and, we're having we only have one BCBA in the district, correct, Mike? This is a large district. COVID certainly didn't help, but whether we hire a full-time person or if we can just contract somebody, I was just hoping that you could maybe, look into that and then report back to the board. I can't hear Ann at all, and she's sitting like...
I can't either. Oh, now I can. We meet again on October 6th, so yes, I'll be sure to bring that up.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Or if you need to meet with Beth or Mike offline, and then just to keep the ball rolling on that. I don't want to lose like weeks at a time.
For sure.
I don't want to put anything on your plate, but I'm going to put something on your plate.
Yep, got it.
Excellent, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Ms. Kenny for curriculum?
Also met on September 8th, and we reviewed the programs that were held this summer that were funded primarily by federal grants. There were math and ELA programs held at Lafayette and at Washington, and we discussed the transition programs for the rising 6th and rising 9th graders. We got an update on the state mandated testing. There will be 60-minute sessions for content areas that will require some delayed openings. These tests will be for informational purposes only. They will not be used for any class recommendations or graduation requirements. We also got an update on the evaluations for teachers using the reflective process. And lastly, at the last board meeting, a former student spoke about her experiences in an AP English class. We reviewed the course goals, and I'd like to direct the public to the school district website where the curriculum profile for this course is. On the website, it does the goals of the course. A couple of the top two talk about reading and understanding sophisticated fiction and in fiction and nonfiction texts, identify literary elements and rhetorical strategies, and understand how they enhance the meaning of a text. And some of the essential questions that the course asks are, how does a writer's style or rhetorical and literary levels enhance the meaning of a text and influence an audience? And how does writing improve critical thinking? Dr. Asusa, do you want to add anything else about what we discussed?
Nope, not yet.
Sure. So like you said, that's an AP course. All of our AP courses, we're required to submit the syllabus and the reading materials that we use to College Board, which has been done in this course. The goal of an AP course, of course, is to prepare students for the AP exam, because if the students obtain a certain score on the AP test, they can potentially gain college credit depending on the score that they get and the policies of the school or university they attend. This teacher's been in the district for over a decade. She's taught over 1,000 individual Chatham students. There's never been an allegation like this. She strenuously denies ever pushing her own political agenda on any students. The pass rate over the past 5 years for this AP course in Chatham is 96%, which compares to a national average below 60%. So I think the teacher is preparing these students appropriately and effectively for them to meet with success on the AP exam. Having said that, every student has their own perceptions and experiences in the school. We have, 1,275 students thereabout at Chatham High School right now. If a student or when a student has a concern, they should, of course, seek out their teacher, speak with the teacher. If they're not able to resolve whatever the concern is, then they should seek out the principal or the supervisor. And hopefully have a discussion where they can share their feelings and how they're feeling about a certain course or a certain teacher, and hopefully come to a resolution that is good for everyone and makes the student feel welcomed and supported in the school environment. So that's what I'll add there, and I'll reiterate what you just said. We have thousands and thousands of curriculum materials available on our website. If any person goes to departments, they can click on math or ELA or social studies, and they can pull up curriculum documents. This one is 8 pages long, and it includes all of the potential readings in the course over the course of the year. So I'd invite anyone to do that and take a look at what we have posted.
So based on the discussion that we had in the curriculum meeting, there will be no changes to this class. And that concludes my reporting.
Excellent. Mike, I think you made a good point. I mean, if a student they all have their different perspectives and their experiences in a class, and it doesn't matter what we teach, it's what they're learning, right? You could teach it all, but if they're not learning that, but nobody should suffer in silence, right? If a student is thinking, one thing is happening, address it immediately. Address it that day, that week, bring it up. If you come back a year later, it's less effective, and if you really want to affect change, bring it up sooner, and you can point out examples when you said this or when we covered that. I think it'll be more helpful for the student to have a more effective dialogue with the teacher or the principal than, coming back months later. And the AP courses are approved by the College Board. You're not making up the curriculum, but they are advanced. They're complex material. They're advanced, readings. But it also seems that, regardless of where you fall, your ideology, if you only have time to spend, 30% on one section and 30% on another and 30% on a third, just mathematically, your particular ideology is not going to get the majority of the time. So, the students also have to realize we're trying to get through, a ton of material, and if we don't spend enough time on, the piece that you're most interested, it's sometimes we just have to move on, but that's not to say don't talk to the teacher. Have a dialogue if you think it's slanted or, there was some other, goal that they think a teacher was trying to accomplish, but thank you for looking into that. A lot of times we don't make a comment during public commentary because sometimes we just have to look into it. We have to, investigate, see what the allegations are, and we often will circle back at the next meeting. So sometimes things we can't answer right that evening, but we try to by the next meeting. Lotta, did you have anything else you wanted to add on curriculum? And you do not. Okay. Mr. Del Sandro, if we can kick it over to you then, both for finance and facilities, and also if you don't mind standing in for policy and planning.
I'd like to hear first. Finance.
It's on my list first.
Okay. At the Finance Committee meeting, we discussed future referendum or possibility thereof. We discussed upgrading fire alarms, brick pointing and waterproofing, CMS interior improvements, high school turfing of the high school field, possible turfing of the middle school field, HVAC replacements, renovating of art rooms, and fixing the Cougar field track, which is, they're all kind of big numbers, and I guess we got to figure out which ones we're going to shoot for in a referendum. I don't know if it's going to be all of those. I have absolutely no idea. But these were the numbers we were talking, those were the discussions we were talking about. Also, the turf field that we're thinking about at the middle school was where the girls predominantly play most of their sports, that was the idea. Originally, they were talking about Cougar, but this has come up where we're thinking about the middle school instead, next to the currently turfed field. So it's the lower field where the softball fields are. But it's a $20,000 $20,000 for research that we've approved. So this way, they can find out about the wetlands, and Department of Works have to figure out what is possible, what is not. So that we have to find out if that's an actual possibility. So. We also discussed there was a custodian who got caught in a flood. Coming home from work, he spent the night here during a flood, and we approved that we would cover his towage of his car, which was $250. He lost his car altogether. They totaled his car. So what else? We're having trouble with, not trouble with, but they were discussing transportation update, which was the idea of perhaps purchasing busing for ourselves because we're having trouble with bus drivers and trying to find bus drivers to finish the routes. So Pete DeQuilla is going to be looking into the idea of basically pros and cons of owning our own busing. One of the bigger problems would be hiring bus drivers, aside the fact that you don't own your own buses then. So I don't know if you want to be a bus service, but Pete's going to look into that. So Pete, you want to talk about that at all, or no?
Or the cost of a 54-passenger bus is approximately 90 to 110, depending what you outfit it. One of the things we were interested in is going green. I'm waiting for information to come back from the manufacturer or who sells electrical bus, but an internet search blindly led me to data that an electric bus costs almost $300,000. So I know you save a lot in fuel and repairs, but I don't know how feasible that will become based on the current outlook of getting drivers to operate the buses. But we'll continue doing more research.
But even if somebody gave you 20 buses tomorrow, you don't have drivers.
No, and we didn't set aside budget money for them. So it's almost a pledge to try to get drivers before we go out and invest capital to get buses.
Right.
Because even if, for example, I wanted to become a bus driver, it would probably take me at least 6 months to get through the state's process to get a license. So,
Get
and I,
going.
well,
Get going.
I would imagine that the insurance, I don't know what it costs to insure a bus, or, in terms of insurance, if we're going to vet it out, we have to kind of hold that in as well. Yeah, I think it's got to be.
like that.
I think one of the bigger problems was also getting kids to sporting events right now, if I remember
Yes,
right.
that is
That's a big issue.
Yeah.
So they're having trouble.
That is a big problem, even if our 2 buses were just used in the afternoons for extracurricular activities, that would be a savings. But the issue is getting someone to drive those buses. Hey, I'll gladly ship some of my hours if you want me to drive a bus.
No, not shift, it's addition. This is Mike, Dr. Lessus has been reporting on the bus shortage for several years now, and it just certainly was exasperated by COVID. But, so more to follow on that. Initially, I'm not throwing myself at the idea of being in the busing business, especially when the real problem is drivers. But again, I was not part of that dialogue, so thank you for the report on finance. Was there anything else on finance and facilities?
No, that's pretty much it right now.
Okay. Did you have a timeline on any referendum stuff, or is it you're all still just in
Well,
initial discussions?
if we are to think about a referendum this year, all right, meaning, hold on a second, if I remember right, if the goals are 2022 referendum projects need to be decided by the end of October now. So we have to figure out what it is that we want to prioritize.
The board member, but the architect gave me, when I spoke to him about the initial, he said by end of November, beginning of December, we would need the projects so they could get them to the DOE. Because unfortunately, the DOE that used to have 16 people reviewing projects now has 2. So.
16 to 2?
Nice.
Getting the bus driver's licenses?
I think they retired some people and put some people out to pasture and just don't, when people leave, they don't refill the positions. I think they ran away.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that update.
Yep.
House policy and planning, since you're the lone man for both those.
Well, that was fun. Well, there was we talked about the school year, how it's going so far, and how there's been no problems with kids wearing masks at school. There's been, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, there's been no issues with anyone being defiant wearing masks or anything like that. So lucky us. Talked about screening and testing for staff members. Right now, we have an 87% overall vaccination rate. Teaching staff is 89%. Administrative staff is 94%. Paraprofessional staff, 76%. Custodial staff, 65%. And secretarial staff is 83%. Lab Q will be testing people starting next week, I believe, from what I can see and remember chatting about. Now, they're an organization who just tests, and then they submit it to insurance. It doesn't cost us. Or the federal government. Okay. So it costs us nothing for the testing of those who are not vaccinated. So they get tested here by this company. It gets sent to insurance. I guess if they kick it down the road, I guess the feds take care of it, is how it basically works. But it doesn't cost us. I don't know how that all happens, but it sounds like somebody's making money someplace. But it's not costing us anything, so it's all good. Let's see. We also discussed policy regarding transgender students, which is quite eye-opening when we were discussing it. And your policy, Mike felt our policy is out of sync. He once thought it was right there, we were on the forefront, and now it's sort of trickled back. As the world turns faster, then we could all catch up. Want to chat about that at all, or no?
Yes. So our transgender policy was adopted several years ago. It needs to be updated in light of changes at the state level. So we're in discussions with our board attorney, and we will be, working on that in the coming months. And then we had other policies on the agenda that are up for first reading tonight.
Policy on comprehensive health and physical education, and surrogate parents and resource family parents, policy regulation number 5116, education and homeless children, policy regulation 7432, eye protection, regulation 8420, emergency and crisis situations, Policy Regulation Number 8420.01, Fire and Fire Drills, Policy Regulation 8540, School Nutrition Programs, Policy Regulation 6115, Federal Rewards and Funds, Internal Controls and Allowability Costs. I'm supposed to read all of these? I'm there already. Okay, then I'll have to read them all. Okay, basically, the committee discussed the above, and we approved the first reading at the 9/20 board meeting, which is tonight.
Those are all Strauss-Esme policies. Nick, you can just leave my mic on. And so these are, most of them are mandated policies, the typical updates. We have them on for first reading. They're the boilerplates from Strauss-Esme. I did want to double back on finance because post our meeting, at the very end of last week, we finally found out our allocation under ESSER 3. That's the ARP money that most districts in the state found out in June or May, thereabouts, what their allocations would be on that third stimulus package that the federal government passed. We didn't because we are a non-Title I district. There are only about 35 or so non-Title I districts in the state. We're one of them. But we did get our award for $1.2 million. So there are specific categories in which you can spend those funds. They all have to do with COVID response and pandemic response. One area of expenditure is related to the health and safety and well-being of students, such as improved ventilation systems or HVAC units. Another area has to do with mental health. So when we talk about looking at additional supports for students, one source of funding, even though it's only temporary, can be the federal funds that we just learned we would have access to. So we're going to be working on that and generating a priority list of expenditures in terms of the federal dollars. And I also do want to just mention on the busing side, school districts are just trying to explore every avenue they can to help mitigate the issues that we're experiencing. You probably saw that in Massachusetts, the governor called up the National Guard to drive buses literally throughout the state of Massachusetts. Some districts, and what we talked about at finance was, maybe just very slowly, trying to purchase or lease purchase one bus per year, maybe assembling a very small fleet, but that at least it could reduce a potential issue that we have if we did find ways to get existing staff licensed under the CDL requirements. We could potentially use them after school. There are districts in New Jersey right now canceling athletic contests because they can't find a way to transport students to any kind of away event. So even though these discussions are in their infancy, we just want to explore anything we can do to try to improve the situation we find ourselves in with these bus and transportation services.
A quick question on the testing. I know right now it's for unvaccinated staff is required to undergo testing. Is there availability for vaccinated staff that want to be tested?
Yes, we do have staff members asking if they can be tested even though they are vaccinated, and the company is able to accommodate us in that way. That's not on the table with this vendor that we have, but we fully anticipate that once we get the state resources on board, that, well, we know that part of that is to open up the testing for students, for those families who want to have their students tested.
Okay. Do you anticipate using any of that funding as reimbursement for monies that we already put out of our general operating budget?
I'm not sure. We might have some of that. On this agenda, you'll see another approval of the telehealth services, for example. We're still using funding from last year, federal funding from last year, but we may run into a point this year pretty soon where we need extra dollars. So that's one place. I don't know if Peter has anything that qualifies for reimbursement from the ESSER 3.
We're still waiting on the guidelines that, that go with the proper uses of and how to use the funds that they announced we would get last week. So,
you'll circle back?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. One more question.
If we can
So
make
far, just one.
the increase for behavioral services, get sort of like, if not number one, number two, to allocate and work with our special ed director to start bringing in qualified people to help support our teachers, our staff, our students, to kind of get back into the swing of school and not be crisis management, but more meaningful behavioral development
Yes.
versus putting out fires each day. And I think we'll move the needle a little further if we have more people on board to help everybody.
We did actually just advertise the position internally today. So we're starting the process to see what kind of candidates are out there. And then if there aren't any candidates, then we would move and consider alternatives. But we figured we'd shoot something out to get the process started.
Chris, any additional updates on your report?
No, that was it.
Thank you again. Sorry to throw you into that.
No sweat.
Excellent. I'm sorry, Laura. Can't hear a word she's saying.
I just wanted, not to belabor the point about the buses, but one of the biggest impediments that we had about to change the school times was the lack of flexibility of an outsourced bus service. So I think, I'd be supportive of moving, looking into it so that we'd be able to potentially change the start time at the high schools so that those that take the bus could potentially sleep in to a more reasonable amount of time. So.
I believe one of the problems that was mentioned was bus drivers are working early in the morning, and then they have like a 4-hour, 5-hour span of nothingness. And then, so you hire people to bus drive in the morning, and they're off, and then they got a bus drive in the afternoon. There's a lot of span of time. It's tough to find people to just want to work for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. I think that was a big issue. I was wondering if there was maybe find a way that people could be doing something in the building all day, drive the morning, and then do something in the afternoon. But that's all something that's all.
Any other questions or comments for Chris? I feel bad you're on an island over here.
That's okay.
Social distance. Okay, so we're going to move on to our liaison reports. Does anybody have any? No? Oh, go ahead, Lada.
Yes, for the 2021-2022 school year, Chatham Education Foundation has already awarded grants of close to $60,000 for the CHS math thinking classrooms and the CMS geometry classrooms. They hope to award an additional $40,000 to $60,000 in grants this year. Additionally, they have seen significant growth towards their goal of a $4 million endowment, with over $1 million funded to date. These funds will be able to provide an ongoing stream for grant awards and help to mitigate any critical issues facing the district. They are proud to have been awarded a Guide Star Platinum Seal for governance and transparency. And until they can safely host another trivia night and a casino royale, our fundraising activities will continue to be focused on our appeal, the fund the need, and teacher tributes. It is through the generous support of our donors that we are able to deliver grants that help our students and teachers have access to innovative tools and methods. Please look for CEF at Fish-A-Whack and Back to School Nights, or check out the chathamedfoundation.org to learn more about all the things that CEF does for the district. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lada. So we're going to move on. I'm just going to the minutes for August 23rd. I make a motion to pass the public and the executive session minutes. Seconded by Michelle. Peter?
The only person present that needs to abstain is Mr. Smith.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Bradley abstended. Any abstended?
Duly noted, passes 501.
Perfect, thank you very much. So we have our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing of the citizens during public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to prevent all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. I just want to add a comment at the beginning of this. After the last meeting, one resident wrote to the Board of Education email address wondering why we didn't admonish or make a comment about one of the public comments. It was a comment comparing the Holocaust to wearing masks. And we don't really comment on the comments unless it's germane to the school district. So while I found it deplorable, we cannot impede on somebody's First Amendment rights. People have the right to say what they want. The board can prohibit disruptive behavior, but what we can't allow is that public comments can't just be reserved for the individuals whose views the board finds acceptable and then exclude those views the board doesn't find acceptable. So it's a very slippery slope when you denounce certain public comments versus others. So what we try to do is answer the questions we can. Either a committee chair will answer it, I'll answer what I can, Dr. LaSousa will. If there's, for example, an accusation or an allegation made, we take that back, we research it, and we report back at the next meeting if appropriate. But again, we're not going to comment on comments unless it's really relevant to the school district and our particular roles. We don't cheer when somebody's in favor with us, just like we're not going to admonish somebody when they say something that's, maybe offbeat a little bit. So I just want to make a comment on clarifying why, when the board's just not going to answer things like that, we will answer and address things that we have control over. So without further ado, sorry, Amy, for that. I just wanted to explain why we didn't make a comment about the comment.
Okay, well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Amy Reale, and I'm here representing the Chatham CPEG, and I'm here to announce an event for CPEG, but I think because it's the beginning of the school year, I'll just give a quick intro to CPEG again. It's the Special Education Parent Advisory Group. We work with the district, and our main job is to provide input that we gather from families in the district who use any student support services. We gather input, and anything that's bubbling to the top as a systemic issue, we try to relay information and work with the school district. But we also try to have events and do some informational work as well and support families in other ways, sometimes just coming together. So, without further ado, our event, sorry, I'm having a hard time getting into my phone with the mask. Well, we are really excited, so it's good that it's dramatic. On October 5th, in this space at 7:30, we're hosting our new Dr. Emily Sorrentino, who is Chatham's Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services. And we're really excited that she's agreed to speak to us. We're having an open CPEG meeting, which is going to be extremely brief. And then we're intending to have kind of a fireside chat format where we have some questions, and Dr. Sorrentino gets to tell us about her background and hopes and dreams for Chatham. And then we're making sure we have time for any parents who want to have an open Q&A and ask questions of Dr. Sorrentino. So I think it'll be a really nice chance to meet this important person in the lives of students who get special services, and I hope everyone will come out. It's in this space, there's plenty of room to spread out, and yeah. Thank you.
That's a Tuesday, October 5th. I just have to look it up. Tuesday, it's October 5th on Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
It helps me to know what day of the week is my schedule is by days.
Yeah, and my phone already locked out, so I'm glad you added it.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. Oh. Okay.
Ryan.
Go ahead.
I'm getting some, Nick. I'm getting some info from people watching the board meeting online that they can hear me and Mike LaSousa and Chris Del Sandro, but that they cannot hear anybody else, including Mrs. Weber or any of the other board meetings. So I don't know if there's anything you can do on that end, or we're not doing something right up here, but.
Well, we're going to start all over then.
We are not going to do that.
New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law.
Right. I'm getting a little feedback, not the feedback that we want.
Is it being at least recorded so that they can hear it after the fact? I mean, so do you know if they heard Lisa and Karen?
She just said they can hear the speakers fine. This is the teacher that's reaching out, that's watching it. They can hear the speakers fine. They can hear Michael Sousa, Crystal, Sandra, and myself, but that the rest of the board members are having trouble hearing.
They didn't hear me tell Peter to get his CDL license?
Apparently not. Yeah. So it's not actually official yet.
Peter, get your CDL license. Okay, well, that's very unfortunate. Hopefully folks will just watch the rerun of it. Do you know what the problem is there?
Talk closer to your microphone.
I can hear myself loud and clear on the speaker. Okay, thank you. So
Okay.
at least we can hear the public comments, so that would be great.
Okay. I'm Cheryl Whitney. I'm the grants chair for the Chatham Education Foundation this year, and I'm thrilled to be here today to present a check for $31,524.06 to the school district of the Chathams. The Chatham Education Foundation is funding a grant, Reimagining Geometry, which creates 3 more math thinking classrooms. This time we're impacting every 8th grader taking geometry. This grant purchases special whiteboard furniture and movable whiteboards and accessories for each of the 3 classrooms, as well as some items to supplement the new geometry curriculum. These items were purchased with COVID restrictions in mind, and it's expected that they'll be able to be used as soon as they're delivered. This will benefit students by making geometry less abstract and helping bring it to life. As you may know, I know all the board members know, but perhaps all the audience doesn't, this is the 3rd math grant initiated by math supervisor Stacy Winters, who has often brought grant applications together with math teachers in the department. Chatham Education Foundation first funded a grant, the Thinking Classroom, back in June 2019, which transformed 2 Chatham High School math classrooms. This summer, CEF funded a second grant, the Thinking Classroom Phase 2, which funded whiteboard walls, furniture, and accessories in 4 additional new math classrooms at the Chatham High School. This grant now brings the Thinking Classroom to the middle school to help all 8th grade students with geometry, as well as purchasing some items to help enhance with the new geometry curriculum. The new math classrooms have a different look than traditional math classrooms, with writable vertical spaces and desks. The feedback from students and teachers from the initial Chatham High School grant has been overwhelmingly positive. Students and teachers have been very excited about the classrooms. The classrooms allow for visible thinking, active learning, movement, and they encourage collaboration, all of which improve learning. Stacy Winters and the district have even received some national acclaim for their implementation of the new math classrooms. To see a video presentation on how the Thinking Classrooms work, please visit our website. Students have said about the new classroom format, and I have 4 quotes, each from a different student for you. I like the boards because it gives a lot of space to work and allows you to work with others easily. The whiteboards help me see where I made a mistake and help me determine what I need to study and work on. The whiteboards are very helpful for doing problems and seeing how others do it easily. And finally, the whiteboards are really fun. I love being able to get up and work somewhere besides my desk. Math supervisor Stacy Winter said, "Thank you, CEF. You have helped our goal to make meaningful shifts in mathematics instruction." Since the start of our fiscal year on July 1st, the Chatham Education Foundation has given nearly $55,000 to the district, and the school year has just started, so we look forward to many more grants this year. And last, I'd like to thank our donors, without whose generous donations we couldn't fund these grants and others to come. For anybody listening at home, since they can hear me, right? So please check out our website at www.chathamedfoundation.org to see our donor list, including the growing list of endowment supporters, and to learn more about Chatham Education Foundation and what we do. So thank you, and thank you to the district for all the great things that you're doing for our students.
Driver's license. Perfect. Just so it's on the record. That's fantastic. Thank you, Cheryl. We really couldn't, I think the district is so fortunate, the generous donations and the supporters of everybody in town. So thank you for always bringing good news. Mr. Heap?
Bill Heap, Chatham Borough. I'm here wearing my JC hat tonight. I'd like to announce that we are having our interim JC Fishwack race this coming Saturday. We were shut out last June because of the early spring spike in COVID, and we are running the race this Saturday in conjunction with the Fishwack event that will take place downtown. It's a great outdoor event. You don't have to wear a mask. Fun run at 9 o'clock, and the more serious run at 9:30. Unfortunately, I don't have a t-shirt. We did this on short notice, but they are due in tomorrow, and I am sure that when everybody gets a look at one of these shirts, well, let's just say the fashionable Chathamite will want to feature one in their fall wardrobe. So come out and get some exercise. Also, I would like to announce on behalf of the senior citizens, the Senior Center, and I know this runs counter to student drinking, but the Senior Center is going to sponsor a keg party at the Beer Garden. Remember those? It will be held in the afternoon at the gazebo, and there's nothing quite like watching a bunch of senior citizens get blown out of their socks and then go on a rampage downtown to try and get to the early bird specials. So this is, it's a win-win. You can get your exercise in the morning, and then you can, drink it back on in the afternoon. Come out and talk to your neighbors. Get off of social media. It should be fun. So that's it with regard to that. I have a few comments with regard to the presentation tonight. Especially sleep and social media. Sleep has been a problem since Adam and Eve. In fact, I don't know if any of you remember the Dylan tune, You Ain't Going Nowhere, made famous by the Byrds on the Sweetheart of the Rodeo album. One of the lines from that tune is, and Genghis Khan, he could not keep all his kings supplied with sleep. We have a highly educated population in town. In fact, if you talk to people, everybody's a Saturday morning virologist these days. They know everything there is to know about health effects, healthcare, mask mandates, vaccines, and so forth. It would be nice if they put some of that intensity into making sure their children are supplied with sleep and stay off social media. I'm not sure that the school district can do a whole lot about that. It's really up to the parents. And that's that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. There's an example of a comment I wouldn't comment on. The cake party at the gazebo.
Hi, I just want to add a personal comment because we were talking about math, and I'm someone who's speaking personally, having a daughter who had to leave the district because of a math disability. And I'm excited to hear the stuff happening in the high school, and I have hopes that, maybe she'll be able to return. But it's interesting, by third grade, you can already predict by your math scores and ability where you're going to live, the apartment, problems that you'll have later on. This is all happening. I know math is kind of like the stepsister to reading, but this is all happening at the elementary level. So I know that in my experience, understanding that math is a stepsister, I took training programs myself to try to verify they're good. It costs $800 to do a great structured math training. I know that people with disabilities learn the same way as everybody else, just at a different rate. So when you educate a teacher, K through 3, you're helping all students, not just students with disabilities, but math coaches, math interventionists. It was sad for me to leave. It was even sadder for my daughter. You can hear I'm still emotional about it. I just implore you to start sooner, start earlier, and there are so many curriculums that, just like the behavior programs go tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, you cannot intervene out of a bad tier 1 program. So let's look at those K through 3 programs. Let's evaluate Pearson and see if it's a solid program that works. I have plenty, I've done so much research on this. I'm happy to meet with anyone, talk to anyone about my ideas, but can we try either through CEF or other avenues, start earlier with math? Because even though it might be a smaller number of kids who struggle, it does affect academic esteem, all the things that the ladies here talked about tonight. Those are the things that parents with learning disabilities worry about after having academic failure for so long. The result is some of the things that we heard here tonight with depression, anxiety. So, again, I open myself out as a channel and a resource because I've had to know more than anybody because it's my own child. And I also ask that maybe we start sooner. Let's get those vertical whiteboards in the first grade. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? We've kind of run out of audience members. Okay, so we're going to close the first public commentary and move over to the agenda. Again, these are posted on Friday afternoon before the board meetings, so we've already had the opportunity over the weekend to look through them. So moving over, Anne, could you handle the personnel items?
I'd like to move agenda items A1 to A21 on the regular agenda, as well as A3, 7, 8, 10, and 19 on the addendum.
Second.
You heard Michelle, right, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Excellent. Does anybody have any questions or comments on any of those items? No. I'm just looking at the addendum. Excellent. Okay. Peter, would you mind?
Sure. Agenda items A1 to 21, including addendum 3, 7, 8, 10, and 19. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro? Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Excellent, thank you. Chris, would you mind doing finance for us, and also when it comes to it, policy?
Not a problem. I'd like to move items B1 to B13 and addendum item B14.
I will second that. Just want to acknowledge the donation, $242.57 for cyber grants on behalf of the CAF America. A direct donor is Mr. Kang, who's a middle school parent. So thank you very much. That's fantastic. Any additional questions or comments on the finance or facility items? I know we talked at length earlier during the committee discussion. Peter?
Sure. Agenda items B1 to 13 and the addendum of B14. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro? Ms. Kenny? Yes. Mr. Smith? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Excellent. Ms. Kenny, curriculum?
Yes, I'd like to move agenda item C1 to C4 for vote.
Bradley seconded.
Oh,
Brad or Chris?
Thank you.
Mike, the delayed openings, those are for testing? High school only.
But they're not. They're, like, are they grade specific?
Michelle asked if they were grade specific.
They are grade specific. We didn't list the grade levels because there's some direction that has to come from the high school about each one, and we're also going to layer in the PSAT testing that we do every year. But yes, it won't be delayed openings for the entire school. Some grade levels will be testing right off the bat.
Okay. When can parents expect that additional instruction to go out, roughly?
Karen, do you know that?
When can the parents expect the additional instruction on the delayed openings for, at the high school only, October 12th, October 13th, and October 14th? Okay, that'd be great.
It's coming within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, we're at September 20th. The next 2 weeks, we're pretty much at October 12th. Do you know what I mean? I just want to make sure we have ample time. You see where I'm going.
Yeah, we certainly, I think we're following roughly the timeline that we usually do with the spring testing.
Okay.
So we have the first student knows the schedule. We are approving the calendar change tonight, and then the high school will do its communication. And the other buildings, remember K3 doesn't have any of this, but 4,
Right.
5, and 6, 8 do.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right,
Go ahead,
agenda
Peter.
items C1 to C4. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro? Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? And Ms. Weber?
Yes,
Agenda items pass 6-0.
excellent. Chris, back over to you for policy.
Move agenda items D1 and D2 to vote.
Second.
There we go. Since Ann's the only one that could be heard. These are all in our folder. They're red-lined up with the Strauss SMA changes. So this is a first reading only. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? There you go.
Duly noted, agenda items D1 and 2 pass 6-0.
Excellent, thank you. So for board business, Dr. Lususa, I just wondered, I know we're in the middle of still a global pandemic, but have you given any thought to when we could begin the discussions? And if it's not this year, then the answer is it's not this year, but discussions about start times. We talked about sleep, and you've been talking about this for several years now, how the high schoolers need more sleep, and you're trying to delay that start time and maybe flip-flop some of the grades, but is there any way to get traction on that again for discussion?
Yes. Milburn just moved its start time effective this year.
Milburn High School?
Milburn High School, and they ended up changing the start times, I think, at many of their schools, and they moved their elementary start times to earlier in the school day in order to accommodate their high school, I believe.
They moved their elementary later.
Oh, elementary's later. Okay, so everyone moved later. I have the contact from the Milburn superintendent of a pediatric physician that helped provide input and expertise to the board. I haven't reached out to that person yet with everything going on this year. And like Ms. Kenny said, the specter of transportation and complicating that has, just given me pause. But yes, we should get traction. We saw the survey results tonight. I agree with Mr. Heap entirely that a lot of this is out of our hands. One thing that is in our hands is when we start the high school and the middle school day, and all of the research shows that even though social media and interacting online still can keep students up, they sleep more when school starts later. End of story. Research is clear, indisputable. Kids sleep more when the school day begins later.
Right.
So thank you for the nudge. I need to redouble my efforts and recommit to making this happen at some point in the near future.
Would you consider sprinkling in, as you did at one point, like a delayed opening here and there? A scheduled delayed opening, just because, like you said, when you call a snow day the night before, the kids get to sleep in versus when you call a snow day at 5 in the morning. as much as we'd like to hear your voice at 5 in the morning. So it's something that you had done in the past and it seemed to have worked well, that maybe you can, at the height of when, the winter, when things are difficult, or, giving students an extra 2 hours with plenty of advance notice, because, I commute into the city, so I would need a little advance time so they can make arrangements. We could maybe take advantage of the fact that some of the parents are still working remotely, but I just want to throw that out there as a suggestion that maybe, I know you can't change the start times this year, but maybe we can do something to sprinkle in a couple of days as stress relievers and allow kids to decompress at least, once a month.
We can do something like that, at least at the 6 through 12 level, where parent supervision isn't as critical in the morning.
Right, and where the sleep is most deprived as well. Okay, great. I just wanted to, again, I know you have your plate full with pandemic things, but I don't want to lose sight of the benefits of changing the start times, particularly at the high school and when we can at the middle school.
Thank you.
Any additional? Oh, Michelle?
Yeah, I just quickly back to the Finance Committee. When you meet again to discuss the referendum, can we make sure that we have ample time to get community input on priority items? Put several surveys out like we did last time. I don't want to rush this. I want to make sure we have a balanced approach into what we think is best, and also what our community is, what they have an appetite for.
That's exactly what we discussed, was to come up with a timeline that mirrors pretty much the last successful referendum, with survey, input, so on and so forth.
Perfect, thank you.
So it's not likely to hit 2022, given that timeline. I mean, I don't sit on finance, but quite frankly, even if all the lights were green, we couldn't get contractors to do the work anyway right now. You can't get materials, you can't get contractors, so. I'm sorry, what, Chris?
It's expensive, you said. But it's very,
Extra expensive, sorry.
yeah, that's just,
Right. Yeah, I mean,
I think.
okay, great.
All right, thank
Well,
you.
more to follow. So that's probably a multi-year project. Any additional comments from the board, or any new or old board business that they want to discuss? Any comments on the comments?
Ms. Weber, I'll just comment quickly on something that's popped up this weekend with respect to quarantines, because I've answered a few emails and so have some of the principals. So when I sent out the back-to-school letter to the community in August, I had a section and I had some underlined language in there and some bold print about the fact that with respect to remote access to classrooms, we were going to try to draw the line at positive COVID cases and students for whom we initiated a quarantine due to exposure in school, which is something that we have oversight over, something we can verify, and something that we take every step we can to avoid by instituting certain safety protocols and certain measures that we hope will lead to fewer quarantines. And that we would not provide remote instruction for exposures that took place outside of school. So let me just say, first off, this is a really tricky issue. I spent literally hours talking with other superintendents from all over about this, talking to board members about this in our committee meetings in July, talking to our principals and administrative team. And there's no question that probably every single parent in the District 201 would like their child to be able to have access to classroom instruction when they're home, for whatever reason, whether it's a COVID-related reason, or it's because they tore an ACL and they're recovering, or because they got poison ivy and it's uncomfortable to be in school, but they can follow along from home. We know that it's convenient and useful and helpful and beneficial to students to be able to tap into the classroom and follow along with what's going on with their teachers. However, at the same time, last year we were inundated with hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of quarantines resulting from outside exposure. Youth sports was possibly the biggest source of these quarantines, but so were parties, so were family gatherings, so were kids getting together at each other's houses. We couldn't even keep track of the number of quarantines that were coming to us outside of school. Inside of school, we had a handle on. We were overwhelmed by exposures outside of school. And As a result of that, it was impossible for teachers to know how many students were going to be present in their classes every day, how many kids were going to be logging in from home. It really created sort of the Wild West in terms of keeping track of kids and who was in school and who was not in school and how to prepare for that best. Last year we were in crisis mode. We had to operate that way. It was necessary and we did the best we could. This year, our discussions and the consensus, certainly among superintendents, but also among the board and our administrative team was, while we of course recognize how beneficial it can be for a kid to be home and following along, for the sake of trying to return to a sense of normal and trying to stabilize the classroom environment for the teachers and for the students who are present in school physically, we really wanted to try to minimize to the greatest extent we could the remote access and that aspect of how we were operating. And even though it might seem as though it's easy for a teacher just to put the Google Meet on and not have a two-way sort of dialogue and not try to incorporate the kids at home, the reality is that teachers are aware and feel obligated to be aware of what's going on the other side of the Google Meet. We had numerous instances last year of students or parents doing inappropriate things and disrupting classes. We had one instance of a father at the elementary level who appeared in his underwear on screen. So there is a level of supervision and responsibility that the teacher has when she's operating a Google Meet. At the same time, last year's classrooms were very different than this year's classrooms. We had tape painted on the floors so that teachers stayed right in the front and center of the room, 6 feet apart from all of the students. I directed all of the staff to do everything they could not to capture video of students and only focus on the teacher. So we had Chromebooks positioned so that students weren't captured on Google Meets to the greatest extent we could control. There are privacy and confidentiality issues related to streaming images of students. This year's classrooms are much different. 90% of our teachers are vaccinated. They're moving around. They're interacting more closely with kids. Kids, obviously grades 7 through 12, are also heavily vaccinated. They're moving around and interacting more. And of course, we're living with a 3-foot rule in our classrooms as opposed to a 6-foot rule, which means that bodies are just generally closer together. So at the current time, we recognize that it's not necessarily the most beneficial thing to an individual student who might have to quarantine to not be able to tap into the classroom. But we're trying to draw the boundaries so that if a student is absent due to a quarantine resulting outside of the district, we provide that student with Google Classroom materials, and we have more materials online this year than we've ever had before in the history of the school district. We treat the absence just like we did in the past, which is to provide those materials to the student, enable the student to contact the teacher or the parent to contact the teacher, and we try to get the student back in school as soon as possible. We're very fortunate right now in that a year ago, the rule for quarantine was you're out 14 days. 14 days, period. This year, it's 10 days. But because we're in moderate transmission, you can drop down to 7 if you get a negative test taken between days 5 and 7 of the quarantine. So in reality, if you can drop down to 7, no student should be out of school due to a quarantine from outside exposure more than 5 days. And in some instances, it's less than 5 days, depending on when the notification was to the family of the exposure. So we might be only talking 3 or 4 days. I recognize it's not perfect. I recognize that, honestly, down the road at some point, I'd like to be able to take what we experienced from the pandemic in a positive way and enable students to follow along at home when they can't be in school for whatever reason. But for the time being, in order to avoid the inundation that we experienced from quarantines coming at us from every single nook and cranny of the world, it seemed like, we want to try to hold to minimizing the amount of remote access that we provide, at least at the current time. That could change, and it could change if the transmission level moves from moderate into high. But for the time being, the goal is to try to keep the classroom environment as stable and focused as possible and not have teachers trying to balance these two competing areas of attention. So I just wanted to mention that. Again, it's not perfect. We're choosing the lesser of a bad, the less bad of two bad scenarios, but we're not alone. Most districts are doing it just the way that we're doing it from the ones I've been speaking to.
Right. Yeah, we knew it wasn't going to be perfect. Policy spent hours and hours on this dialogue, but we've put an emphasis on in-person learning. The goal is to keep as many kids in school as possible and to have that be quality time now, to go back to normal. It definitely, if a teacher's stuck to the front of the classroom, it's going to impede how they instruct. So for now, we'll just keep an eye on it, but I think we still go the course. And you had said that you want to take some of the lessons from the past and maybe incorporate them, later down the road. Is there a way to maybe get a teacher to videotape a particular lesson? Today we're doing fractions. Because a lot of times the instruction is a short period of time and then, going around the room to check to see if for understanding. So I wonder if there's a way to maybe come up with these short little Khan Academy videos if the, teachers are willing to, I really like the way you taught fractions. I think that's so when kids are out for 5 days with an ACL tear, I'm hoping we never have to talk about COVID for a while, but if they're out for an ACL tear and they're going over a particular subject in social studies or mathematics, maybe we could have a library of some of those lessons where it's, just the teacher teaching. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility to build our own Khan Academy. So when they are out, this is what's being taught, click on this link and you'll get the lesson. If you have any questions, let's talk about it. Again, just throwing that out there as a suggestion. So thank you for the detailed explanation. I know Policy Committee, thank you. Chris, you're the lone policy guy, but I know you spent hours and hours and hours on this particular topic. Any additional comments or questions from the board? No? We have our second opportunity for public commentary. We've kind of gone through everybody.
Bill Heap again. Sorry, I can't resist. I made a comment before about the high level of education that we have in town. Well, based on Dr. LaSousa's comments about behavior during remote learning, it also appears that we have our fair share of morons in town. I know you can't say that, so I will.
Again, another example of why we don't comment on comments. Thank you, Mr. Heap. Any additional public comments? No, seeing none. Okay, we do not have an executive session tonight, so I make a motion to close the public meeting. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Excellent. Thank you very much for coming out. Please drive safely. Thank you, Nick. Nick, maybe you can help us understand what's going on with the